So here we are back again. It's the four gentlemen. Good to have Kevin back after what was it, the flu tried to take him out, but he's back on his feet. Austin toughed through it last week, red eyes and coughing and all.
D11, baby. We're built different out here.
Exactly.
Yeah, we're built sick in
I
the Lehigh Valley. That's just how it works. But we're all back, and today we got some news, and let's jump right into the Gable Steveson news. He's coming back. And last year, I had talked to Eggum, and obviously with McKee coming back and Block's coming back, that was the plan, was for Gable to be the third piece of that puzzle. And he didn't shy away from it in the preseason interview that him and I did. But maybe 5-10 minutes before the news went live, me and Earl got a text from Eggum that said, check the Minnesota page at 3 o'clock. And I immediately thought, oh shit, Gable's coming back, right? Like what else would it possibly be? Um,
Brock Lesnar
so
had one more year.
yeah,
Okay, yeah.
right. Like something had to be happening. And I immediately thought it was Gable, especially with, his circumstance that he's, basically training with John Jones. He's not playing football. He's not in WWE. I think his wrestling safety net is happily here to catch him, right? Um, but I'm gonna go first and let you know I'm happy about it. I think it's great that he's coming back. Um, I know that the NCAA fans will be ready to boo him the same way that they booed Dayton Fix for being the old guy in the group. I honestly highly doubt that that ever happens. Unless, well, I mean, actually, maybe I should take that back because NCAA is in Pennsylvania this year, and we saw what they did to Jordan Burroughs, the Penn State fans at least. So,
Yeah, fuck
not
that
gonna
guy.
hold out, not gonna hold my breath on that one. Maybe it does happen, but no, I was pretty excited for it. Good to see him back. I think I'm hoping that he makes the jump to freestyle as well. Because that would be awesome to see him do. But it is very surprising that after a couple of years of being gone, we get both Gable Steveson and AJ Ferrari back in lineups. Gable putting on the Minnesota singlet again, AJ Ferrari in a completely different part of the country. Um, but what do you guys make of it? Like I said, I'm happy about it. I think it's awesome. I think it brings more eyes to the sport. I think that it helps him rebuild maybe something that he may have lost with kind of going dark, I guess, with being in an NFL camp where there's not a lot of eyes on him anymore. I feel like there were eyes on him just to see how he did and how he transitioned, but not not a lot of hype pertaining to how he would do. I feel like the bar was pretty low in that regard. But I think coming back to wrestling, he's back in the spotlight. He's back to getting covered every single week. And if he does end up going the MMA route, which he was just training with John Jones, if he does end up going the freestyle route, this certainly helps. And I think it's awesome. So I'm Team Gable coming back to wrestling and giving more people either something to cheer about because they think he's awesome or to boo about because they think he's the old guy in the group. What do you guys make of it?
I mean, I'm happy he's back because it's fun to watch Gable. I hope he does stick it out and transition back into freestyle long term after this. And, I mean, maybe this could kind of just be, I don't want to say he's using the college wrestling season to get into shape for, future in freestyle wrestling potentially. But I mean, that's kind of what it would be, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I'm fine with that. It is weird. The eligibility piece of all of it has changed over the years. I'm kind of done being the old guy who's all butthurt about it. Like it is what it is, and I think that if being the old guy, we should kind of recognize like you don't get to do this forever, and eventually like you run out of chances to put the singlet on, put the shoes on. Although I do maintain that when you take your shoes off and retire in the way that he did, like that should be it. There should be laws that stop you from coming back then. All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, you don't
Uh,
get shoes back.
yeah, no, there's not the white ones at least. I mean, those are the
if
ones we left.
if Mike Tyson can come back after 20 years, I think
Fair
Gable's
enough.
good after a couple.
Who's gonna tell Mike Tyson no to anything? Like,
Yeah, right.
Jake Paul.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Mike's actually a
Yeah,
really nice guy in person.
I'm sure.
I
I'm sure
believe
he
that.
is. Yeah. Um, but no, I mean,
nice
I'm
name drop,
happy.
Holmes. Jeez.
Yeah, there you go. I am excited for Gable to be back. I'm excited to see him compete. I was just looking at the heavyweight field here, and I mean it's deep in a lot of athletic talent across the board, right? I mean, Trumbull, I know Robbie, you've been a big fan of, and was talking him up. He's dangerous. Nick Feldman, I maintain that, but I said I thought he was going to win the national title this year at heavyweight before Gable came back. But I mean, he's got the size, athleticism, those sorts of things. And just in general, it's going to be interesting to see if Gable is still Gable, right? Where things might have fallen off over the last couple of years, where it's going to be different, the competition that's just gotten sharper and better and more eager to beat this guy, right? So we'll see what that looks like. The one last piece I want to comment on, though, and I know in the one of the posts I think I saw on Instagram from Minnesota Wrestling today before this news dropped showed like literally they've got a guy ranked at every single weight class. Before it's changed on Intermat right now, or before the Gable news came out, they were the 8th ranked dual team, tied for 11th with Michigan for the tournament team. Like clearly this impacts their chances at getting a team title, or not team title, excuse me, team trophy, and just being a better showing for them. So I'm almost more happy for this program than Gable necessarily, right? Like this is going to be huge for a program that has, was pretty awesome when they were awesome, back in the J-Rob days. And I think, just as somebody who watched those teams kind of smoke the rest of the Big Ten in the country for that matter for years and years, I'm excited to see him come back and be a dangerous team again. So it's going to be fun.
I think that's the one thing that I do like about this situation is that he's coming back to Minnesota. I think, I mean, I'm not a huge fan of it anyway, and I'll get to that in just a second. But I think if he were to be another one that was poached by, one of the teams with deep pockets, we all know who they are.
Which
I
was a
think it would have a,
possibility at one point. There
yeah,
were there were the Iowa rumors that before when he was supposed to be coming back.
yeah. And I think that would have a completely different feeling, and it would have much more of a villain kind of aspect, more like a Mako feel to it than anything else. Um, but I think what bothers me, and I'll be the grumpy old man, is that like the retroactive use of red shirts just it doesn't sit right with me for someone to be completely out of school, disengaged from the entire process, not in college, not doing anything with the team, with the program, and still being able to utilize redshirt years and have eligibility. It doesn't sit right with me. And I felt the same way with Ferrari. Like if he's not enrolled in school, how is that clock, not working? We used to have a really firm expectation that as soon as you signed, as soon as you started, you had those 5 years, and that was it. Barring an injury and then having to go through the whole process of getting, an extra year granted. But now it's, with the COVID year, with the redshirt year, with the Olympic redshirt year, we're seeing guys there for 7, 8 years, and I think I'm just annoyed with the overall process of having people there for so long. Like I think it takes away from some of those young guys getting an opportunity, and I think that's kind of where my issue with it lies. Like I have no ill will towards Gable. I think he's great. I think it's going to be good for eyeballs to be on the sport. I think it makes a good weight class even better. I think it's good for him to have something that he's good at and he's back at. I think the WWE was kind of a big failure for him in regards to him being so successful with everything up to that point. And he wasn't successful with that, wasn't successful with NFL, which was a huge jump anyway. But he's kind of back where he's been super successful, so that's great. I just don't like the process.
Well, that one thing I wanted to throw in there too that is super weird and different. I mean, back in the day, if you left and got paid somewhere else,
You were done.
you were done. Like you can't come back now. You're no longer an amateur athlete, regardless of the circumstances. Now you can just go kind of do whatever, get paid, and hey, more power to them. Again, the rules have changed. It is different. I understand that.
But even that's different from the NLI stuff or NIL.
Right,
But
right.
I mean, the thing
Yeah.
is though, is we've seen guys do that though. We've seen it happen in
We have.
baseball, but they never went to college and obviously me as a Florida State fan, I remember Chris Winkie who did it, right? Who played baseball and then was like a 20 some year old freshman, right? So like I remember guys that went on and played pro sports, but then went back to college. And there's been a couple of guys that have done that in other
But his
sports.
clock never started too.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
so that's I think what is very different about this entire situation. So, but yeah, like with NIL, it certainly does change what these things look like now, where they're being paid anyway. And I remember when Kyle Snyder won Worlds in what was that 2015, and they
And he
were
had to hold the
wondering,
check.
and yeah, and they were wondering what was going to happen. And when he won the Olympics, they're like, or when he won Worlds, they were like, okay, what's going to happen with that money? Um, and I think at that point it had to go into like an escrow
Like a
account,
trust. Yeah, something like that.
and he couldn't touch it or whatever else. And same thing happened with the Olympics. But they figured out a way that he could accept it was really the way that they had to go about it. Now, none of this stuff changes. The contracts are the same. I mean, he has sponsorship. I'm sure, Nike made sure that they were part of it. I mean, the shoes that he wore the last time he was on the mat were prominently featured. I mean, it's the thumbnail of the video that they put out today. So all these things have
How'd they go from the
drastically.
middle of the mat to being on that tree though?
I don't know. I wonder. I'm guessing. Well, his brother Bobby had the shoes, so I'm guessing it was one of those, kind of like the wire where they throw you throw the shoes up on the line. Maybe he missed, and they
Yeah.
ended up
Fair.
in that tree. But no, I
He
think
wasn't as good of an athlete as Gable, so that's fair.
maybe it just doesn't have as good of an arm. Maybe. But that's the thing is like with NLI or NIL, it does really change the landscape of what these guys can do and where they can go. And I think that's why I'm not so upset about it, because give any of us an opportunity to do something really cool, right? Like if I had a year of eligibility now, I think I'd be like, maybe I'll think about it, right? Like that's the thing for me. I don't think it's that bad. I really don't. And I didn't think it was bad for Dayton Fix. And I don't think it's bad for Brock Hardy, who is, I believe, like a sophomore eligibility or something like that at this point.
And more bald than me.
And that's the thing is like, honestly, like, yes, he did have like a Mormon mission and everything else. So he took 2 years away, but like he was part of that same class coming out, I think, with maybe Dayton and those guys. So he's been around for a very long time. So like that's the thing for me is like they're allowed to be paid, so that doesn't change anything. And then there are other guys who we've seen in other sports. I mean, I think Miami has a football player who's been in college for 9 years, and it's mostly due to um what is it, medical red shirts. He got
Yeah.
injured like 3 times. So
He's not
like
even a doctor.
it's not I don't
Crazy.
even know if he has his BA at this point.
Probably
Um,
not.
but like it is the U. So I mean, that's the thing is I think it's awesome for him to be able to come back and have the opportunity and do these things. I do hope it transitions over to freestyle. Austin, any of your thoughts on this entire situation?
Yeah, I mean, I might get hate for saying this. I'm just kind of throwing it out there. Is he coming back strictly for the money? I'm sure he's getting a nice NIL package. He left college wrestling, didn't work out with the WWE, didn't work out with football. So maybe he's thinking, what other options do I have? I want to make some money. This is my only way to do it. Part of me thinks if he really liked wrestling, he may have stuck with that if he had a future there. Again, not putting him down for chasing the money, but I mean, some people might think he's just coming back for the money, for the paycheck, and his heart really in it? I would think so, but I think there's a question there. He left the sport. I'm looking at his wrestle stat here. He started in 2019, left in 2022, so 23, 24, 2 years out from the sport. Now he's coming back. Is it because he's out of options? I don't know, but um, I don't personally think that. I think that's just, that's the question that I think people are probably going to ask. But overall, I think it's good for the sport. Olympic champ coming back to wrestle, a lot of eyes on him. He's very marketable and a super freak athlete. Like we all know that, right? So it's going to put a lot of eyes on the sport. It's good. I'm glad he's coming back to Minnesota, like you guys said. Um, I think people are going to be asking, is his heart really in it? Is it just a payday? I mean, does it matter to some people? But I think it's a question to ask.
Doesn't
It
matter to me.
it reminds me of like that friend who like breaks up with his girlfriend and he's like, I'm gonna go see what else is out there, and then realizes that
Yeah.
there's nothing else out there, and he's like, I wonder what she's doing, you know?
I wonder if she's thinking about me too.
Wait, are you texting Minnesota again? Give me your phone.
Am I still
You know?
blocked?
Yeah, I don't think that, like I said, those conversations happened last year where
Yeah.
he wanted to come back. And, I think it was Christian Olenowski that was responding to Johnny DeJulius on Twitter where he said, it's not the fact that he's coming back, it's the fact that he had an opportunity to go to Worlds, going to Final X, winning the spot, and he doesn't go. And then has the opportunity to come back last year and it doesn't happen. Misses the Olympics. But I also feel like none of those decisions were made by Gable, they were made for Gable, in the sense of WWE was like, yeah, we're putting a lot of money into you. You need to be over here doing this. And I'm basing that off of trying to get Jacob Casper on for an interview.
Yeah,
And
it's not easy.
it's not, or even when I tried to get Bobby Steveson on for an interview when he was in the WWE, like, it is not easy to get these guys just to do interviews, to talk about their careers, talk about wrestling, talk about their transition, like, not even gotcha type pieces. It's more promotional than it is anything with these interviews, or just trying to get a peek behind the curtain of how great it is, honestly, not the grind of all of it. Casper just posted the other day, like, 17 days, 10 flights, all this other, like, let's hear about that. Let's hear about the lifestyle. Let's hear about, the opportunities that are out there for the guys that potentially don't go that freestyle world champion Olympic route. Right. So, but that's why I feel like those decisions that disappointed fans when he didn't wrestle at Worlds after winning the spot, those were decisions that were made for him. And if he had the chance, I think he wrestles for an Olympic spot. I feel like he isn't sticking around WWE knowing he's going to get cut before the Olympic Games, saying, no, I'm just going to chill and lay low or anything else. I think he comes back and tries to make another Olympic team if that's the case. So I think we're all in agreement that it is good for the sport. We might not like some of the tedious details and maybe the logistics of it. Um, but that's the situation that we're in, where guys can do that now. They can be paid, they can take a hiatus no matter what the reasoning being, whether it is something like Gable exploring all the incredible options that he had, or it's something like Ferrari where you just can't. Right. So, like, ultimately having these guys back in wrestling, hopefully we can just focus on the wrestling. And I'm speaking mostly about Ferrari, who's, been in and out of the news for terrible reasons, and not Gable, who's been in and out of the news for pretty good ones, of being able to explore options of his dream, right? I don't think football was ever his dream, but hell, you get a chance, collect that check, throw that helmet on, right? You get a chance to work with Aaron Donald and all these other guys. Like, you've seen him working out with them. Von Miller is his teammate at that point. So I don't fault him for it. I think it's pretty awesome. I can't wait to see him back on the mat. And they also said that he's available this semester, so it's not even something he has to wait for.
That was the other thing that was confusing to me. And I'm assuming it's just because this has been such a long process with them trying to get the years worked out and all the eligibility stuff. So he is most likely enrolled in classes this semester.
Yeah.
But it just kind of struck me as odd that, I just assumed that it was going to be a second semester thing. So it was kind of surprising to me to hear, oh, he is going to be eligible next week or in 2 weeks. So
Yeah. November 24th is what they're saying, against Campbell. So,
golly
Godali's going to
golly,
have
that'll be fun.
a
Good test
nice,
for him.
a nice little test. It'll be cool to see Gable back, and it'll be cool to see Gable back against a guy who I feel like, obviously Kyle Snyder and Mike McMullen were kind of the catalyst for this agile heavyweight, but Gable was really the guy that really, like, pushed things in, like, you have Kassar that was there as well, but now there's Kirkfleet, and there's all these different guys, and Kadali's one of them. And he's one of these guys that is certainly on the come up. And Kadali also is wrestling at the classic, I believe, too. I think
Mhm.
he's taken
Yes.
Younger spot.
Bastida's Bastida's spot. So um it'll be a good match. I'm looking forward to it, and I think it's going to be great. Everything, I don't think, there's been probably one time that Gable's done something where it was a black eye for the sport, and that was done in less than a week. So I think
Yeah.
it'll be great to have eyes back on it. Maybe it gets the attention of Ariel Helwani, who wants to talk about it, or Joe Rogan, who wants to talk about it, and it brings these, a even bigger kind of global look of what their fan bases have into the sport. Any
With
other
that,
Gable thoughts?
well, just one bigger thought. And while I'm going to be an ACC homer here, moving the WWE route, and we can hit on this Conch because I know you were there last night, right?
Was. Yes, it was. It was
So
awesome. I
let's
saw
talk
Rey
about
Mysterio
the
Jr.
prominence of Duke heavyweights in WWE right now. We've got three of them doing a great job. We got Jacob Casper, the Creed brothers. We got Jonah Niesenbaum, and Braden Ray is also in the WWE NXT. So Lanham and Tom Erickson are getting them ready for something. I guess maybe that's something to be said for that.
So you're saying Gable should transfer to Duke if he wants to outlive his WWE
I
dreams?
think maybe that was the window he missed.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, the logic tracks.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Makes
Could
sense
you
to me.
imagine? Could you imagine if Zion and Gable were on the same campus at the same time? It would the school would probably shift to one side with those
Yeah.
giant humans walking around campus. Um, but no, let's
Are we,
stick it. Let's stick
are
in
we
the ACC.
real quick? Are we sure Kale doesn't have another year of eligibility? Like,
Unfortunately, COVID didn't hit until 30 years
oh,
after
that's
he was
right.
done
That's right.
wrestling.
Yeah.
So
He's Mormon
Damn
though, right?
COVID.
He could do a mission.
he maybe
It's been a long one. It's been a
There's
long
it's
mission.
a super long mission.
very
His
long
mission has been
mission.
to improve wrestling as a whole, and he's done a
Yeah.
Yeah.
fantastic job.
Yes.
Um, that'd be pretty wild to see. I think I'd still take Kale over most people
Mhm.
on any given day.
Kale over Gable. Who are you taking?
The Kale and his giant chin.
Yeah, it's not really a head hands defense for Kale. He's sitting next to you, you're like this. You're a giant man. Like
Yeah,
you're a very big dude. Like that head block is serious.
yeah.
Mhm.
It's like a
Well,
giant cinder block that you got to fight through, and it's just not.
but let's stick in the ACC. Not a good week for NC State, and we had some tweets back and forth. You were puffing the chest out on day one, and you were hoping to get a little bit more bullets, but it it looks like you're shooting some blanks today when it comes
Just one,
just one. Okay,
just one
just
on that.
one.
It was a very blank 1 minute pin. Um, but that's kind of where I'm at with him. Is I think Trumbull has a huge upside at heavyweight. A 2-1 win over Gadali in a interesting match, kind of a boring match with a really really cool scramble at the end. Um, but to be at a new weight to knock off an All American in your first week of competition, I think is a good start to me.
Yeah, the
Felt,
reason that
felt
I
flat
said
against Schultz, but
yeah, the reason I responded, and obviously it's always fun to respond to each other, but the reason I was just like, man, I didn't think it was a look at him. I'm making points and he just walks away.
Yeah.
See how that
No,
He
works?
can't even handle it.
cool.
See
Yeah,
how that
I'm
works?
scared.
Good point, Ryan. I got something to do. I forgot
Yeah,
about.
you see,
Yeah.
like this
I gotta
is
take a shit.
It was
this is
scheduled for right
this is
now.
exactly how
Crazy.
that works.
Had to let the cat in. It was making noise.
Yeah. There was a cat, all right. I saw him just get up and walk away. No, I the reason I said this is like it was a locked hands call. And that's
Yeah,
why I was like, I don't know if it's one of those moments that you're touting as, he's like an I'm here moment, right? Like I would have loved to see more offense, right? I think if you
agree.
wrestle that match again, there's way more offense in it. So that's why it wasn't a knock on Trumbull. I just think that the moment wasn't right just yet.
No,
But I
I
think
don't
he's
disagree
certainly
with that.
I certainly think he's a force and he's going to be
I
great
think
come the end of
I
the
think
season.
what we saw in the last 30 seconds of that match is what I would expect, for the entirety of most matches. He is a pretty offensive wrestler. So is Gadali generally. I think it was kind of a feel out match, and just one of those matches that was a little boring. But that last 30 seconds was back and forth. They were both really close to takedowns. Turnbull was really close to back points on a takedown. Just didn't fight through it all the way. So that was more of kind of what I was expecting out of that match. But I think he wrestled at 285 last year, won Midlands, um, won a world title for U23s. It was in Final X. So he's there, and I think a statement needs to be made that he's going to be in contention for it. I think starting off with that win over an All American is a good way to start that bullet list. We're just going to ignore the pin against Schultz and go from there.
Well, I mean, Schultz took a loss too. He took a loss to Luffman, and that was, I mean, again, it's kind of
That
the
was a
same
weird
scenario.
call. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a stalling call. Which
He wasn't not stalling.
yeah, and that's the thing is,
But it's heavyweight. A lot of these guys, they don't do much, right?
I
don't
I mean,
know.
I don't
the
know. I
top
mean,
guys do, but
we
I don't
have
know.
we have a handful of guys that do, right?
Yeah, we do.
We've
Yeah,
got Keeter, Kirkley. I mean, Gable is now back, right? So like, there's a Gadali, Trumbull. We've got these guys who move their feet more now, and Colton Schultz is the last of that breed of guys that doesn't have a dynamic offense. And I say that with all the love in the world for him, but it's a Greco match for him all the time because that's
Yeah.
what he's preparing for at all times. It's similar to Gable getting ready for freestyle and using folk style as a way of getting ready for that. So the stall warning, while I see why it probably happened, okay, I don't really hold much, stake in that. I just feel like it was a match between two immovable objects, and that's what you get. But Colton Schultz is still a very, very good opponent for anyone. But like, I would like to see him hit a knee against the guy that's not one of his training partners, because that's the only time we've seen him hit a knee was in their wrestle off against one of his own training partners, was when he took a shot like 2 weeks ago. So let's get the offense going, and maybe a snatch single. Let's grab a leg. We know, leg grabber you or not, but let's do a little bit more.
Were you sure that knee touch was intentional? Like maybe did he trip and like catch himself and like
No, it was
ended up in a
definitely.
penetration
I
slam?
The
watched
mat
it.
was slippery.
I
Yeah.
watched it a couple of times. There was a step, there was a penetration, there was a knee pound. Like, it was,
Wow.
the knee hit the mat. It was a legit leg attack. And it's like, if you've got that in your back pocket at all times, then I don't want to see you sticking your leg out, tempted guys to shoot anymore. Right. Like, give us something here. But sticking with NC State and upsets, and we're gonna bring Luke Stanage back into the mix. Kevin missed the Stanage Lemley conversation. He was conveniently sick, just like there was a cat that needed to be let in when I was making points. But Austin, Luke Stanage, as you said, is going to be deferring eligibility. I think is what it is for those guys in the AWA.
Technically, yeah.
But he takes out Kairini 4-1. What do you guys make of this match? Austin, you were there, I believe, right?
Yeah.
So what was the, I watched it, but you were there. What was your takeaway from that upset win?
I mean, it was one takedown match, 4-1 score at the end. Great scramble, great reattack for Stanich. I just think he's still growing into that weight class, coming up from 125, even though he looks really, really big for it.
Yeah, he does. He looks huge.
Yeah, he's a big guy. That cut to 25 last year was pretty nightmarish from what I've heard.
Yeah.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, and getting up to
I also don't want to make 125 right now.
no,
I haven't done that
not
since
many
like fifth
people
grade,
do.
so you were good.
Yeah. I mean, but yeah, it's like he's at the point now where he believes he can be there and beat these guys, and he beat two All-Americans this weekend alone. He got kind of beat up by Mendez last week, but who doesn't? Mendez is really freaking good. I think Stanich, I think the plan for him is to still redshirt unless a Malik Hines and Carter Bailey get hurt, which Hines is a little dinged up now, but he'll be back in a few weeks. But yeah, Stanich growing into 41, eventually maybe even 49 for how big, if he gets even bigger. He'll be a force. He's really, really good, and Lehigh loves him, and he's just getting better every week, I feel like.
Yeah, I was gonna say with the tear that he's on, beating guys that he's literally never even seen before because they were two weight classes away from him. Is there a world where they're like, man, maybe he gives us a better chance at some things and they put him in the lineup? Or is it still these are the guys that are going this year, Stanich, you're keep racking up these wins to prepare for next year.
I mean, in all honesty, between him and Max Brignola, who's up at 65 now, redshirting, he looked
Yeah.
pretty good. I think he could be a top 20 guy if he hits his capability. If those two guys come out of redshirt, Lehigh's looking at a potential trophy team. Between Crookham, those two, Beard is in that mix,
Mm-hmm.
and Nate Taylor. He's a top 8 guy as well at heavyweight. So that's 5 potential All-Americans there. Two
What
are
was his injury
probably
this weekend?
Um, I heard it was just a potentially MCL or LCL, whichever one
Okay.
is the minor of them, if there is one.
I think the
Um,
LCL.
yeah, and
Yeah.
they don't think it was a tear. I think it was just a sprain.
Okay.
But that was just the initial, diagnosis, minutes after it. I got to follow up and see what that is. But yeah, I don't think it's anything serious. He should be back in the next week or two. I know they do wrestle Penn State in the beginning of December. I'm not sure if that's a target he wants to hit, depending on, I don't think that should be his first match back, especially if Kirk Fleet's in the lineup. So that's kind of still TBD at the moment.
Robbie, what do you make of the kind of I don't want to say bad showing, but not the best showing for NC State? I mean, Ed Scott taking 2 losses. He loses to Harrington from Harvard. He loses to Drew Swisher from Penn.
Can't
Just
beat the Ivy League guys. What's
can't
up with
beat these
that?
smart guys
Smart
apparently.
kids.
Yeah.
Smart kids.
He's
I
like the
mean, but
opposite
Ed
of
Scott
Ralph
had that kind
Wiggum.
of a year last year too, where he had some
He
losses.
loses weird matches.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's the most consistent thing.
Yeah.
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 I don't know. It's kind of an up and down weekend for them. Um,
Even Camacho at 25
yeah,
took some
Camacho
losses
is 0
too.
3.
Yeah.
Yeah, what do they
Uh,
do at what do they I hate to jump away from Ed Scott right now, but what do they do at 25? They have kind of
I
a
mean, Vince
dilemma
Robinson
right
had a hell of a
now.
weekend
He looked
Yeah.
and
really good. Really good, really fast, really big for that weight class.
really strong. Yeah,
And
he's super
If he can
impressive.
maintain weight, he's dangerous, man.
Camacho had a similar little skid last year at the beginning of the year where in was it in Nashville when I was there, he went 0-3 there
Mhm.
and was not doing very well. No, I mean he took a little bit of a hiatus after that and then came back and was better, but like is this him maybe just knocking the rust off or do they have a serious dilemma at 125 with these two guys now?
Well, I think, and we can kind of hit on a few different weight classes with that, where there's some really interesting options and some really interesting battles that we could have this year. That's certainly one of them. And Camacho's on what, his 5th year, 6th year, 7th year? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So he's in his 7th year at NC State. Um, is it age catching up with him? 25, being 125 at what, 23? That's
Father time's undefeated.
yeah, that's he's also been there since 2019. Um, so maybe that's what we're seeing. Maybe it's harder to make the cut and it's harder for him to hold, which also opens up the option of moving up to 33 since Orini moved up to 41. So I mean, there's a lot of options to play with there. So it's going to be interesting to see how they handle it. But I mean, Vince Robinson had a hell of a weekend and looked fantastic. Um, and then like you hit on Scott, he was not a great weekend, but then you had Jackson Arrington who beat the same guys and looks good. Um, You had Owen Truffin looking fantastic at heavyweight. He's undefeated this year. So I mean, there's some interesting things that they're going to have to consider and figure out what's going to be best. And I think that you're going to see him utilize those 5 dates, especially for the younger guys, and see what's going to work best.
Yeah.
I just think it for being so early in the season too. Just when I was there watching, when Swisher beat Ed Scott, Penn was kind of celebrating a little bit. It's a big win for a young guy, and they were, really celebrating the win. And I saw Coach Jack from NC State come off just talking to Ed Scott, like, "Hey, don't worry, that won't happen in March." So
Yeah,
again, that's the attitude. March is all that matters.
Which is
So
a
I
gift
think
and a curse, to be honest.
it is.
yeah.
You kind of want to beat these guys in November, but if you take a loss early November, people are going to forget about it come March, right? So yeah, I think that's that kind of their mindset as well.
Yeah, and
We
both of
we
his
won't
losses were
forget.
close. I mean, he had that weird
Mhm.
scramble with Harrington, and the Swisher loss was a 2 point loss. It's not like you got blown out by anybody. It just,
Yeah.
he has uncharacteristic losses. But it is what it is.
I thought that could have been a takedown for Scott against Harrington in overtime too. I think
Agreed. It
that
was
was a
really close.
50-50 call. It was the ref held that one.
Yeah, reaction time was not friendly there.
Is Ed related to Michael?
Cousins.
Ah, there we go. No, he'll be fine. I
Yeah.
mean, as much as over the years I've been, pretty vocal in my disbelief of Ed Scott, like being as good as the ranking said, but like proved he got it done last year. He's got all the tools to beat most of the people at 157, so he could place as high as third or fourth, or he could not make the podium, really, just
Yeah,
depends on
he's
how which guy shows up then, right? So,
he's been an All-American and fell in the blood round twice. So I mean, he's certainly right there.
yeah.
One thing I will say about NC State though, and it's something that we've seen over the last couple of years with them collectively, is just how they develop guys, right? Because I mean, obviously the Hidleys were known for underhooks, but then you started to see them develop an offense, develop leg attacks that didn't even include their underhook. Obviously, Trent is heavier on it, but he's really good at using it. It's really hard to stop. So if you can't stop our best play, we're gonna run it over and over and over again. The same can be said for Ed Scott, where when he came in, it was watch that headlock, right? And I mean, hell, I can remember watching him in the PA State Finals. He pinned a guy, I think maybe his junior year, with a headlock, right? So like,
And we all
it,
knew it was coming too.
and you all knew it was
You just
coming,
can't
but
stop it.
he threw it anyway. But
Yeah.
like something that I just always, I'm not saying that other teams don't do this, but it's just something that's since we're on NC State, that is just like stuck in my mind, is how they develop the offense for their guys, of taking that move away from them in the wrestling room and forcing them to have more moves and put together chain wrestling, and not have that go to. So I think it's another one of those teachable moments for Ed Scott to, get a little bit more dynamic in his offense, get a little bit more varied in his attacks. Not say that he's relying on the headlock anymore. It's one of those ace in the hole kind of a things in your back pocket. But I think it's more of a hat tip to the coaching staff and to everything that Pat Pop has done with developing these guys and continuing to give them an even bigger arsenal from all the things that they come in with, and saying, okay, you're really good at that. We're going to make that better, but then we're going to add to it. So Ed Scott, I feel like, is one of those guys, along with the Hidleys, who are known for, an underhook and then known for a headlock. But on the other side of the ACC, we've got Stanford, who took a trip to Iowa, and no coincidence at all, lying completely, that I'm wearing the Stanford sweatshirt on purpose. They take out Iowa State and look pretty damn good doing. I mean, it was a split 5-5, and they even forfeit at 125,
Right.
Mhm.
and still got the win, right? So like, speaking of development, that's a hell of a development for Stanford, right?
Yeah.
Robbie, what do you make of their 1-1 trip to Iowa?
Full disclosure, I have not watched the entire Iowa duel. I've only seen parts of it.
Yeah.
I was dealing with my children being crazy people. But the Iowa
Sure.
State duel, they looked fantastic, and they took advantage of every opportunity to get bonus points. Um, they were super aggressive, and they seemed like they were on a mission from the opening whistle, and went out there and took it to them. And you saw kind of the ascent of some of these really big recruits they've got. Um, Tyler Knox looked fantastic all weekend. Gregor Chalakian looked fantastic against Iowa State. Did not as much against Teamer, but that they have an abundance of talent, and with the coaching staff that they have there now and the people they have in the room, they're just going to continue to get better. So it was nice to see them start that weekend on such a good note, because all their trips are going to be like that. where
Mhm.
because they're coming from the West Coast, they're going to double up on a lot of things. So they're going to have harder weekends than a lot of teams do. They're going to have double dual weekends more often than most teams do. So seeing how that goes for them is going to be really interesting. But I think this was a hell of a way to start it for them.
Yeah, Knox had a amazing weekend beating
Yeah, he
Ayala
did.
15-10, and that's Ayala, another guy going from 25 up a weight. But man, like I said, like, and I think we talked about it before the season of just like coaching staffs that we were looking forward to seeing, and Stanford was one of them because they had a full year to truly put that time in with their team, and it's paying off early, and we're seeing that with Stanford getting the win over Iowa State, which I don't think most people really even kind of had on their bingo boards was an
Mm-mm.
upset win from Stanford over Iowa State.
Well,
The other thing that
real
came
quick,
out of
let
that
me.
Iowa State duel too is people realizing that Chris Perry is now at Iowa State.
I could see a lot of
Seeing
tweets about that.
seeing a lot of tweets about Perry being on the bench and everything else. I, I
Was he on the
can
bench or was he coaching from the bleachers? It looked
I
like he was
don't
kind of behind
he
there,
was
but
kind of behind, right? But like you could tell, who he was part of.
hmm
Um so very interesting to see those tweets because those were those text messages about him going there, or at least like having the opportunity of being there and maybe helping out or something along those lines, right? Of a transfer leaving Oklahoma State and headed to Iowa State, who looked pretty damn good in that duel against Stanford, beating Stemmet. But yeah, those are the interesting tweets for me. Are like, when did Perry trade in the orange for these Iowa State colors? I don't remember that. So that was interesting to me.
Red and yellow does make orange though, so
Just hey, listen, you're just breaking it down apparently.
yeah, just putting the. I was a detective in another life, I think. Um,
someone got
one
an
thing
A
I
in art
liked,
class.
yeah, right. One thing I really liked for Ayers in general in Stanford. I mean, like, you already talked about, was it Chalakian? Did I say that right? There we
Yep.
go. And Knox. I mean, like, it would be really easy for somebody who is less informed with Chris Ayers' past and ability to develop wrestlers and teams to be like, well, he's just doing this with the guys that he inherited from Cole. But nope, those are some freshmen who just got in the lineup that they recruited, that worked on bringing there, and they've been working with since they got there. So I can tell I'm making a good point when all three of you are nodding simultaneously. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, is this bobblehead night or what are
I'm
we
in
doing?
agreement.
So but no, it was. I mean, I was really happy for them getting that win, and you knew especially after that Iowa State duel that Iowa was going to be like, okay, we're not screwing around. We're sending our guys out there to get wins and be ready to go, which makes that Knox win at 33 that much more impressive too. So
Yeah, Iowa looked impressive. They looked, I mean, I think their lineup was at full strength, um, minus whatever they're doing at 74 and 84. No matter who they put in there, I feel like they're always going to be at full strength, to be completely honest.
yeah,
Um, I would like to see more offense from Brands. That is the
Join the club.
one that
You
is the
betcha.
yeah, I mean, that is the one thing where I'm just like, let's start to put some of these attacks together, right? Like let's see some more offense. Obviously, he's another guy that had some time away. But he hasn't, I don't know if he's scored a takedown yet, maybe one. But it's
Maybe
been
maybe he's
tough.
seen the lines and he's taking the under.
It's been tough sledding for him on takedowns
well
so
done.
far.
Well, if it's under
Um,
5.5, it's been that way both matches. So
yeah.
Pete Rose style, right?
So
All
I
I
mean,
know is I can't wait. Hopefully the weight classes match up, but Edmund Ruth versus Brands again. Man, that's just it's gonna be the old Will Lewan versus Johnny Lovett, you know? Just
Ruth took 2 losses this weekend too.
he
yeah,
did.
yeah,
That I was gonna
Yeah.
yeah, that's
say, like,
wild.
Illinois looked amazing, and yeah, I'm gonna go on my fan club with Lucas Bird getting the hammer in the Lehigh Valley, but like Illinois looked tough, man. Couple of blowout wins, and a couple of guys, him and Cannon Webster getting wins, they look tough. And I think, we talked about how Minnesota gets their firepower at heavyweight and that makes them a real contender. Illinois comes in being a contender. I just think they really need to get Edmund Ruth on track. He's taken some losses. He's looked very lax early on in the season. It is early, and as you said, Austin, everybody is more worried about March than they are anything. And he is an All-American, so certainly the proof is there. But like, man, when you are a returning All-American, you want to see something, right? You want to see that you've improved. And right now, it doesn't look like he's separating himself from the pack of like being a returning All American. And that's what you want to see. But
Yeah, I thought it was bizarre too because he lost to Ebert from Binghamton, who
mhm,
just got in the rankings this week. Um, Ruth got off the mat, kind of put his stuff back on, and sat down and didn't look like upset or anything. Usually a guy that takes an upset loss is kind of like, oh shit, man, I messed that one up, or you're
yeah,
pissed off. But he just sat there, was watching, like straight faced, didn't like. If that was me, I kind of would have been a little pissed. But I don't know. And I can
yeah,
confirm, Short King was there with his tall queen.
awesome,
So I
Nice.
got to see that in action. It was cool to see in person.
awesome. That is, I mean, Lucasburg looked controlled. In that match with Unger, he controlled center. I mean, it wasn't a match where there were takedowns that were scored, but he was holding center, I think, until like the last 15, 20 seconds where he started to back
Hmm.
up and got hit with stalling. Um, but I mean, gains the escape, rode really tough on top. You could see him use those long limbs to, tight waist, just like dig in and claw. And it was just, it was a really, really good ride that he put on. And, we saw what he was able to do against Dayton Fix a couple of years ago at NCAAs. So no surprise that he's looking as tough as he is now that he's, back in the lineup, he's healthy and everything else. So like I said, I'm I'm banging the drum for Lucas Bird. He is highly ranked and he's supposed to win these matches, obviously. But I think he definitely is a guy that people should be a little bit more aware of, and certainly they are with him being ranked number 3 in the country right now. But I think he's a more serious contender than what people are giving him credit for right
Yeah,
now.
I agree.
Um,
Bird's the word. Spread
Bird
it.
is the word. That is actually the title of that segment in tomorrow's Big Ten recap that is coming out in the
Nice.
morning. Bird is the word. So, but I want to get to the Michigan State Open where Kevin was, where there was a lot of Big Ten stuff happening, and you said you met your idol Sergio Lemley for a hot second, and
I
you got to
did,
see some
yeah.
other good wrestling too.
It was like the big gulp scene in Dumb and Dumber. It was like literally walking by and I was like, "Oh, hey, Sergio, Kevin Clutch, big fan. All right, see you later." You know.
And now
Um,
there's a restraining order on you.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
keep that man off my property.
But no, I mean, it was awesome. I love that tournament. They always do a really good job putting it on. I mean, it's, the whole field house, Jennison Field House is just full of mats. They've got seating on the top part, so it makes it easy for families to get up there. And there's all, food setups and everything. So plenty of space in there that makes it pretty easy to run a tournament that's that big, that effectively, So um, it was pretty awesome, though. I mean, you had some good action from a lot of different teams. I'm wearing my Central Michigan stuff because Maction is on right now. We're getting destroyed, but that's fine. But I like the tournament too because I get to see the Central guys. I get to see Michigan State guys, Michigan. This year you had some Indiana guys, some guys from Wisconsin. So I talked to Reader for a minute. Um, but it's
Oklahoma
just
State has some guys there.
Oklahoma State had some guys
Yeah, I
there
saw
too.
that.
Yep, Oklahoma State had some guys. That was fun. Trying to think Ohio, Northern Illinois. Like it was good. And then 157 in particular was pretty loaded. Caleb Fish was there with Oklahoma State wrestling, unattached, but I mean attached, I guess, technically, because somebody brought him there. So there's that. But yeah, so it had the two Michigan State guys, are no longer at Michigan State because Soldate was there. Peyton Keller was the 1 seed. Johnny Lovett was the 2 seed. And they ended up meeting in the finals. The semifinal match with Keller and Soldate was awesome. There was a lot of action for what ended up being an overtime score to get a 6-3 win for Keller. Spoiler alert. But it's fun to watch if you want to go check that out.
Does so Date look any different? And I don't mean just the singlet and the colors. Like, has his style changed? Have they've added? Well, I knew Kevin would have a smart ass answer to that, so I hedged my bet.
Blue.
But no,
Blue and
does
yellow make green.
yeah,
So,
does his offense look any different? Kevin's gone full reading rainbow on us.
yeah. This is
This,
the Intermat Colors podcast.
yeah,
No, I mean, like, it's hard to say. I mean,
because he's always been an
more
offensive
aggressive
guy.
Yeah, I mean, like he was pinning dudes. He was still turning people on top. It's not like he was taking them down, and letting them up, and putting on this offensive clinic. He was still kind of wrestling within his means. He was still really good on top. He got the first takedown against Peyton Keller, gave up a reversal, which in my this is me being a smartass, and obviously hindsight's 2020, but it's like that's the last thing you do. Like give up one, not two, but that's the saying, right? But especially against that guy. One thing I will say about Peyton Keller though too is, I mean, again, I'm gonna say it over and over again. Go watch that match. He has got to have like the most difficult hips to wrestle against because he just gets out of weird positions that you don't see other guys be able to generate like force or power from. He like early in the match, maybe the first 40 seconds, Saldate had like a low leg cradle and then lost it.
He didn't have it anymore.
Yeah, and it's like you don't lose that at that level. But no, I mean in general, it was a super fun tournament. A lot of good wrestling by a lot of good teams. I did really like to see Derek Gilcher there, Indiana 165, who got hurt last year. Kind of, still battling to get back his chance in the lineup. He'll have 2 years of eligibility left, I guess. So it was fun seeing him there. Trevor Chumbley I talked to for a minute, and he was kind of like, damn, if I known all these guys were going to wrestle here at 157, I would have shown up here to wrestle instead of just coaching, So, but I think that's one of the big takeaways I took away from it. It was like, yeah, a lot of these weights actually do have guys showing up ready to go, Even the guys from Michigan that weren't there, at least a lot of those guys were competing last weekend at Clarion. So it is fun to see some of these early season tournaments being pretty competitive. If not at all the weights, at least a couple of them here and there. So very fun.
Yeah, that's definitely different than last year, right? Where guys kind of eased into the season a little bit more and, wrestled maybe not so tough open tournaments, and didn't hit top competition. We're already seeing guys take losses where I mean, there were a number of upsets. I mean, not just the ones that we spoke about. There were so many upsets just in, this past weekend because guys are actually out there hitting the mats and not trying to ease into the season, which I think is awesome. But do you guys have any other teams that we missed? I mean, obviously we didn't talk about everybody. We really hit, some of the bigger tournaments and stuff, but were there any other teams or guys that stuck out to you that you guys wanted to mention before we move on to the next week?
Couple big things at the Mountaineer Open or Mountaineer Invite. Virginia Tech went down. Eddie Ventresca knocking off former teammate Cooper Flynn, who was ranked higher. And then he had an all hokey final at heavyweight with Mullen, Penn, and Katka. So it looks like he'll probably get to go against Mizzou on Friday. Platona and McGonigal both got knocked off, took a loss. But otherwise, they looked pretty solid with the guys they sent down.
Yeah, McGonigal took a loss to Tyler Wells.
Yep.
From Minnesota, and I saw I was watching that, and I saw the clip on I think it was just like on Twitter or something. I was like, I gotta go watch that one. So yeah, that was last couple of seconds that happens, right, and you give up a takedown. But yeah, the one that certainly the one that probably had the most attention on it was that 125-pound match. Because those guys were teammates last year, and Ventresca I think it shows that he really was battling an injury last year.
Yeah.
Pretty
absolutely.
badly. But I think most people probably expected after seeing Ventresca last year, they probably thought, Cooper should have this one, right? They probably thought he would win it. But Ventresca's healthy now. And for me, it kind of put into perspective of, okay, well, maybe that's why there was a transfer, right? Maybe that's why, it's not something I had ever thought about before, but it was just like, maybe that's why, this guy is a returning NCAA qualifier that is leaving, your old
Mhm.
school. Now you see why, right? Like, probably would have been kind of tough to get into the lineup with a healthy Ventresca being there.
And like we talked about earlier with the depth issues at NC State, we're going to see the same thing at Virginia Tech as well. At heavyweight with Kaka and Mullen, at 97 with Sasso and Smith. I mean, there's going to be some interesting battles to be had. So I'm very anxious to see how everybody looks on Friday. It's going to be a hell of a duel
If you had to take a guess, who would you say is the 97 in heavyweight for Virginia Tech
this week or all year.
all year? Who takes the spot?
I mean, it's hard to argue against the young guys right now, the way they've looked. I mean, Sasso is 5-0 with 5 pins. Mullins 7-0 and has a win over, returning blood round guy in Katka. So it's hard to argue against what we've seen so far. Smith hasn't taken the mat yet, so we'll see. I mean, I know they're going to be on pitch counts all year, both of those guys, because they're 6-year guys. Um, and they're going to kind of let it play out all season to see who's going to earn the spot.
Yeah. Austin, anything in the EIWA?
No, I kind of touched on, Lehigh, Stanich won a hammer at Journeyman. Brignol at 65 looked really good. Even Michael Beard came away with a win over
Mhm.
Bronigal. Kind of hung on there at the end to win it, which is usually those are the matches he, kind of maybe drops at the end of the year. So it's good to see him stick one out and win that in the beginning of the season. The only thing I have here, it's more of a disappointing note, was throwdown on the Yorktown, the way they had to kind of
Yeah.
cancel that one match due to
Yeah.
the conditions of the map being all slippery. But Army did wrestle, beat up Gardner Webb pretty good. They had to cancel their match against Citadel, but um,
Would have been a
Ar
similar result.
it most likely, yeah, Army's tough, and they had a bunch of guys at Journeyman Classic as well. No starters, but so it's good talking to Coach Ward a little bit there, and I think they'll have a really good squad this year.
Yeah, that was a really cool event. I wish it would have been able to finish it out. Um, at some point I think we need to realize that wrestling mats in humid areas after sundown don't work.
Mhm.
Um, and maybe we should make that a midday event. I don't know.
I think
But
we try it again at least 2 more times.
probably 6 or 7. And make sure we throw some Olympians out there so they can blow out some ACLs on it
What do you get
and
some
Yeah.
spikes
just
on
see
the
what
wrestling
happens.
shoes?
Look,
Put it on
I
a
Really
roof.
asked,
rip.
I sent a message to McCormick, the head of officials for the NCAA, and said, can we get an exemption where they can wear golf spikes for one match,
That would be
just no
good.
leg riding?
Yeah.
Safety first, right? Let's make sure we've got some traction.
Yeah, scrambling would probably hurt too, but you
Yeah,
got to
probably wouldn't be
scramble.
very fun.
Yeah, you got to scramble.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, Kev, anything?
157, and I think it was the Tiger style invite. The finals was Ethan Miller and Joey Blaze.
Mhm.
So two Big Ten guys. Ethan bumping up to 57. And Blaze is huge. So I was pretty impressed with just the physicality of Ethan Miller in the match. It was a fun one to watch, as well as how Joey was able to kind of storm back in the end and make it close. So I think if you get to see those guys another 2 or 3 times this year, it's going to be split between them. But I was very impressed with both of those guys in the finals. So very fun.
Yeah, Maryland had two. Neville's wanted at 285 as well. And he looked really dominant. I think he had two pins or tech falls or something. I have it in my notes over here somewhere, but I know he was dominant in those first two bouts, and then it was sudden victory in overtime in the finals. But he ended up coming out with a win. So Maryland with two, and then Matt Ramos also winning the title for Purdue, their lone title at that tournament as well. So